all caught up at this point, what you'll have is a whole bunch of little crocheted and knit leaves. So this week what I want to do is make sure we get them all on there. But before we do that, I want to show you how to make the needle turned applique leaf. And that's out of a piece of linen. And then in the kits I put a 5x9 piece of linen or shot cotton or just something that I separated out from the rest of the fabrics for you to do this. In that piece of fabric, what you're going to want to do is cut out 10 to 12 leaf shapes or teardrop shapes. I've got most of mine cut out. The sizes here you want to stay, you know, this one's probably 1.25 inches long. This is 1 3/4 inches maybe. You can vary the width of them. I would say go no longer than 2 inches. And remember, we're doing needle turn, so our seam allowance is included in these. So if they seem a little big, they should be just a little bit bigger. And I didn't draw these out or anything. I just, you know, I just cut leaf shapes, tear shapes, however you want to look at it. Whatever's easier for your mind to think of as you're cutting, right? And they just don't have to be any sort of perfect shape. Once you have your leaves, we're going to establish the crease line. Now normally when I'm appliquing, I'm the kind of person, I really like to have it all done first. So I'll turn it by starch or the applique method, freezer paper, whatever works at that time, because I like to sit and stitch these on and not really think about it. But in this case, this is the same shape over and over. It's a really easy shape. And once we get our lines established, just by hand creasing, and if your crease is a little harder, don't be afraid to just run your fingernail over it. We're just trying to get that seam allowance pressed under so we know where we're stitching. And the piece is so small, I don't even pin it on. Okay, so there we have the shape, and the creases are down. And don't worry about any little imperfection here. We can fix those little jogs as we stitch. Okay, so go ahead and thread a very small needle. I like a sharps for this. An applique needle will work. Just something really tiny because we're going to be appliquing these on. Thread your needle with the same color thread, sewing thread that matches your applique. So then you'll take your bag and just keep playing around. Find a spot that you like. Just throw it in there. Don't put too much thought into it. Remember, we're putting a whole bunch of stuff on here. And we're going to do 10 to 12 of these and then on the embroidery after. Just fold down one piece. You don't have to worry about keeping all the edges folded down because we're going to do that as we go. And I'm just trying to bury my knot. And I'm going to come up right on the fold. Okay, before I take my next stitch, I'm just going to take my fingernail and just pop that down under. You could take your needle and do this. I find it more, I don't know, I find it easier to use my fingernail to fold it down, but on really crazy shapes, I suppose the needle turn will actually come into play. But again, I always turn my shapes first. It's just my preference. And see, so you don't have to worry about how the rest of it's not folded under. The only thing you're really concerned about when you're doing needle turn applique is the very next stitch. And here I'm not being, normally when I applique I'll go 1/8 of an inch, but we're going to go around this again and we're going to embroider on it, so there is no chance that this is going to come up. And we don't need to worry about the puckers that you see if you go every 1/4 of an inch, unlike an applique quilt, right? So here I'm just basically going in every 1/4 of an inch. My thread is coming out here. I'm going to go directly across, come up about 1/4 of an inch, and just pick up one thread into the applique. And here you're picking up such a small piece of the background that there's no chance you're going to pierce through to the other side. So when it gets cumbersome, just hold your bag flat like this. You don't have to be reaching inside of it. That gets really cumbersome when you're trying to do these corners. Okay, when you get to the corner, put your needle up into the corner fold where the folds meet, and then just give it one more stitch just to reinforce that it's a corner. And then here I just take my hand, push the next part down, and then this little tip here will just sort of fold under. And then just continue down the other side. Okay, all the way back to the beginning. Make a little knot right here. It's so small that no one will see it. Weave your thread behind the leaf and then clip it. You repeat that around your bag, placing them in the bottom third. I'd say if you want one to, a small one to peek up here, that's fine too. And then break out your threads F, G, and H, and we're gonna put stems on these leaves with the leftover little bit of your lace yarn, the one that you did across the top. And then once you have all of your leaves on your bag where you want them, we'll come back and work all that fun embroidery. Okay, so I think I did 11 leaves, just stitched around the bag, sort of evenly. Group a couple of them, just make it organic looking. And then the next thing to do is we're going to do a split stitch. So take 3 strands of DMC floss F, whatever color you chose for that. What we're going to do is make the stems. Okay, so again, finding that big hole, come up just towards the point there. And then what you're going to do is kind of a back stitch, but when you go up, so what I'm doing is I'm like 1/4 of an inch down, come up halfway between them and pierce the thread that you're using. So it'll automatically split that stitch for you. We're making the main stem. All right, so we're in here again. Come up really close to where you came out of, so where that bud is. And again, just stab through those stitches. Then we're going to make little vines. So just kind of go into the base of it. We're going to add a stem to that too. So, all right, you're going to come out where your little top vein is, angle it down to the main part of the stem, and then over. Angle it down to the main part of the stem, and then it's pretty much just straight over. You know, until you have 4 or 5, depending on the size of your leaf. And then down. Weave that through the fibers. Clip it. And then I thought it would be fun to bring that sparkle yarn back down. So what we're going to do is just add a little stem, just so those leaves aren't floating around. Okay. So come up in that last stem stitch, and then back down. And this yarn, you could actually just, rather than clipping it and knotting it every time, just hold it into that next place. When we get our stem on, then we can take this thread and make a stem here. And then once we get the veins on here, take that thread and go here, so that we can kind of travel with this inside the bag. Okay, so then with thread F, I've just got 2 strands now. This is the same color. And incidentally, you know, I gave in your kit, I gave you F, G, and H, and you can interchange these however you want to. We're going to work little bullion knots on either side of these stems. I personally think that they look better with sort of a silky satiny yarn, so that's why I assigned that H. But as I talk F, G, and H, you've got plenty of yarn in your kit to switch these. So whatever color is working best for you, that's what you should do. It's not a problem. All right, I'm going to start right here, and I'm going to stab the base of this stem, kind of go through it just to hold it in place a little bit more. And then what we're going to do is work little whip stitches, just tiny little ones, about every, between 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch. So as I'm coming out of the applique, I'm going to just go straight across because we want straight little spokes coming out of here, right? So I'm going to go straight across and come up in the applique just maybe 1 millimeter there. All right, and just make sure you're going straight across. So you're just picking up the background thread, right? I'm going to make a perfect line here. Go into the background and then come up about 1 millimeter into the applique. We want to see these stitches, but we don't want them to be super prominent. We're going to do a little wrap stitch on these after. So right now we're just getting the base for that wrap. Okay, so do this all the way around your leaf. When you get to the point of the leaf, go ahead and just work one right from the point going out, right, and then come back and work down the other side. Just clip it. Okay, so here's my little hash marks. They're as close together as I could eye up and manage. Don't panic if you don't have to measure this, obviously. Just try to stay within 1/4 of an inch. Okay, and so the next one we're going to do is work the little bullion buds. These add so much. They're so, so pretty. If you got a kit and your yarn H looks like this, what this is it's silk yarn, and I plied it apart for you because I didn't want you to use a whole full strand. This is probably of the equivalent of maybe 5 or 6 strands of DMC floss. So if you're using DMC floss, you can sort of play with it and vary it up anywhere between 4, 5, 6 strands. You might have something in your kit that is just wound in a big ball of silk wool, and just use that as a single strand. Don't ply that apart. So this is not one to be plied if you got a kit from me and you have these silk threads. Just pull one of these out. This is what you're using right here. Don't ply the thread themselves. Knot your yarn and come up in the V of one of the vein spokes. Okay. So I'll do this a couple times because it's a little bit involved. Poke the needle down into where you want the bud half to lay. So I'm really on basically at the end of this spoke here. And I'm going to come up where I'm coming out of. All right, so hold your needle and take your yarn and wrap it. For these bigger ones, wrap it 3 times. 1, 2, 3. As you take your needle, hold those wraps with your finger and your thumb and very slowly pull your thread. When you get to the end and it won't pull anymore, take your thumbnail, hold those wraps in place while you bring your yarn or your thread close to your insertion point here at the tip. Go down into the tip to hold it in place and then come on the outside of the V. Okay, and then you can tighten it up. You can use your needle to manipulate the little bullions, the spirals. Okay, and so again, 1, 2, 3. Hold those wraps with your thumb and your finger. Slowly pull your thread till it doesn't pull anymore. And then hold those wraps with your thumb. And then you can complete that little bud. Go down into the point and then come up, and we're going to do that again up for every little vein. But it really adds such, when the light hits it and you hit all those little wraps, it's so, so pretty. So repeat that for every spoke. Now when you get up closer to here, we're gonna just wrap 2 times, you know, maybe even once here. Even 1 time will make it dramatic. That'll be really pretty. So repeat that on all of your leaves. Okay, and then the last step for these leaves is with yarn G. We're gonna outline them. And this is the equivalent of, I'd say, 4 strands of DMC floss, but you can vary that depending on how thick you want your outline. And maybe you don't want outlines at all, and that's fine too. So whatever your yarn F is, most of the time it's DMC. I know in the Whitish Wedding I gave you this sort of sparkly yarn. Just use that as its own. It's a 2-stranded, 1 silk and 1 a sparkly mohair. Okay, and so the little wraps that you made previously, you're going to go, the first time you're going to go under 2. The first one that you made and the next one. And then just slowly pull it through. We don't want to bunch these up or gather them or anything. Okay. Have your yarn laying to the outside, come around that spoke, and then go into the next one at the same time. So every time you're picking up 2 of those little hashes that you made. And then go in the next one. And just pull this just until you get no more resistance, just until that knot forms. If you pull too tight, it's going to bunch all of this up together. So just gently, we're just doing decorative stitching here. When you get up to the little tip of your leaf there, it really just looks the same. You can go into it again, maybe go into that, and then go into the next one, and then just continue all the way down. Knot it at the base and clip it. Alright, so you do that for each leaf all the way around, and then we're going to add the rest of the components. Alright, so I've got all my applique leaves on, stitched, and now it is time to put the little white flowers on. I know in the last video I showed you like physically how to sew each one of these on. So for reference on that, go ahead and just rewatch that. But now, and how I did the other 2 bags was I took the next thing that I wanted to do, which are the same yarn flowers, and I put them all on. And then I did the next component and put them all on. So I'm going to stitch 1 component on at a time, and then I'll break and show you what it looks like, sort of where they are. You know, as far as, I think I talked about this in an earlier video, is that I want most of the big bulky weight to be down here. So we're going to cover all of this up. This will mostly be covered with the big roses and the spirals. And we'll work kind of our way down because we've got a lot going on here in the middle ground. So I'm going to start putting on the little white flowers with their beads and the little wraps to do with yarn E, or thread E, excuse me. So, you know, I'd put one here and then maybe just down here, just sort of make sure that they're spaced and, you know, in a random sort of order. And then the next thing I'll do is the mini roses and those little fabric buds that we do. So every component I'll just stop and just kind of give you a little show of what that looks like. wow, that takes a long time to stitch all that stuff on there. But it's done. Yay! So next week I'm going to show you how to do a little bit more background detail embroidery, just a few more things. We're going to work on this tassel, and I'll show you how to do the lining, which is just pieces of fabric in a hand stitch crazy patch formation, and that will really solidify the bag and making sure that nothing will fall through any little holes that you might have left in there. Thank you so much for joining me on part 5 of the Gypsy Satchel, and thanks for stitching along. I hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next Sunday for the finale of the Gypsy Satchel.